Healing begins when you choose yourself. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of change, and it is in that moment you are called to choose yourself. For too long, you may have waited for someone else to see your worth, to validate your value, to rescue you from the fragments of a broken past. But healing does not begin when the apology arrives, when the relationship is restored, or when life finally treats you right. Healing begins the very instant you decide that your own heart, your own peace, and your own wholeness are worth protecting, worth nurturing, and worth believing in no matter who walks away. The world will continue to reflect back to you the state you accept as true. If you see yourself as a victim, life will echo that back. But the moment you dare to see yourself as whole, as loved, as chosen by the very breath of life itself, everything begins to shift. This is not a call to wait. It is a call to awaken, to stand in the fullness of who you are, and to finally claim the truth that no one else can live for you. Your healing begins the moment you choose yourself. Healing begins when you choose yourself. The inner world commands the outer. Everything in your outer life is a faithful echo of the inner world you have been nurturing, whether consciously or unconsciously. The relationships you attract, the opportunities that appear, the challenges that keep repeating, and even the atmosphere of your daily life are all mirrors reflecting the state you hold within. Most people spend their lives attempting to rearrange the outer world, believing that if only certain people changed, if only circumstances shifted, if only the past could be rewritten, then healing would naturally follow. But here is the truth that can liberate you. Nothing outside you has the authority to heal you until you claim that power within yourself. The outer is only a shadow. The real light source is your inner state. When you choose yourself, you are not merely setting boundaries or practicing self-care. You are commanding the very blueprint from which reality is drawn. The moment you say within, I am worthy of love, I am whole, I am valuable now as I am, you plant the seeds for a transformed outer life, and like any seed, what you nurture inside will eventually break through into visible form. Many live under the tyranny of waiting, waiting for someone to treat them better so they can feel better, waiting for recognition before they recognize themselves, waiting for an opportunity before they see their own potential. But life is always listening to the state you occupy now, not the one you promised to occupy one day. The outer obeys the inner without fail, and it has no choice but to align with your most consistent assumption about yourself. This is why healing begins when you choose yourself, not because the choice magically erases pain in a moment, but because it shifts the entire foundation upon which your reality rests. Consider the difference between someone who sees themselves as abandoned and someone who sees themselves as chosen. The abandoned self will unconsciously expect loss, will see rejection in neutral gestures, will sabotage opportunities because they do not feel they belong. But the chosen self moves through the same world with an entirely different filter. They expect favor, they recognize love when it appears. They interpret delays as divine timing rather than rejection. Choosing yourself is choosing that inner state where you no longer negotiate your value based on how others treat you. You realize you are the cause and they are the effect, and you stop trying to rewrite the reflection in the mirror without first changing the face it reflects. This is not about arrogance or superiority. It is about spiritual responsibility. You are responsible for the thoughts you dwell upon, the feelings you entertain, and the identity you agree to wear. The outer world is a faithful servant, but it will only serve the master you present to it. If the master is wounded, bitter, and unworthy, the servant will create a life that matches. If the master is whole, beloved, and certain of their worth, the servant will bring opportunities, relationships, and resources that match. The most powerful shift happens when you stop chasing external validation and start cultivating internal certainty. This means that even if the phone doesn't ring, you do not see yourself as forgotten. Even if the door closes, you do not see yourself as unworthy. Even if someone else does not recognize your value, you do not lower your own. You stop making your worth a negotiable contract with the world and instead sign it into permanence within your own heart. This is the secret that turns life in your favor, not because positive thinking manipulates events, but Because your inner alignment changes the lens through which life operates. You begin to see opportunities where before you saw nothing. You notice love in places you once overlooked. You walk with an energy that causes people to treat you differently, not because they have changed first, but because you have. The choice to heal by choosing yourself is the moment you step out of the role of spectator in your own life and into the role of creator. You no longer sit in the audience waiting for the play to be rewritten. You walk onto the stage and take the pen, and here is the deep truth. Choosing yourself does not mean you will never feel pain again. It means pain will no longer define you. It means you may still encounter loss, but you will not collapse into the identity of the lost. It means that even if the outer moment appears bleak, you remain aligned with an inner vision that is abundant and whole, and because the outer must eventually reflect the inner, that vision will become your lived reality. Many resist this truth because it requires a form of radical accountability. It is easier to blame the outer world than to transform the inner. But when you finally accept that you are the root cause of your own experience, not in a way that condemns, but in a way that empowers, you will stop waiting for rescue and start living as the rescuer. You will stop asking life to prove your worth and begin proving it to yourself daily through the state you occupy. Every choice you make from that point forward, what you accept, what you release, what you focus on, what you imagine, will be a vote for the version of you that is already healed. And because life is unfailingly obedient to the picture you hold within, it will respond accordingly. The question then is not whether healing is possible, it is whether you will choose yourself long enough, consistently enough, and wholeheartedly enough to allow the outer world to catch up. The seed is already in your hand, the soil is your mind, the water is your consistent attention to the truth of your worth. When you commit to that inner work, you will watch the outer world bloom in ways that seem miraculous to those who have not yet learned the secret. But you will know it was never a miracle. It was the natural, inevitable response to the moment you chose yourself. Healing begins when you choose yourself. Detachment from the old identity. There is a self you have been carrying for years, perhaps decades, that was not born from your divine truth, but from the echoes of wounds, betrayals, and disappointments. This self was shaped in the shadows of rejection, in the silence of neglect. In the harsh glare of criticism, it learned to survive by shrinking, by pleasing, by hiding, by overcompensating, and for a time that self may have been necessary. It was the armor you wore in battles you never asked for, the mask you put on to walk into rooms that did not welcome your real face. But the very armor that once protected you now weighs you down, and the mask that once shielded you now suffocates you. Detachment from the old identity is not about denying what happened to you. It is about refusing to be defined by it any longer. Healing demands that you release the version of you that was built only to endure pain, so you can step into the version of you that is built to live in joy. This is not an easy shedding because the old identity often feels safe. It is familiar. It knows how to navigate the chaos you've known. It has memorized the script of survival. Letting go of it can feel like losing a part of yourself, but in truth, it is the most loving act you can give yourself, because you are not abandoning the real you. You are abandoning the false you. You are releasing the shadow in order to stand in the sun. And here is the mystery. Life will keep presenting you with situations that mirror that old self until you choose to step out of it. If you see yourself as a victim, you will meet people and circumstances that confirm it. If you see yourself as undeserving, you will notice only the closed doors and miss the open ones. The old self will fight. Stay alive by pointing to all the evidence of the past. It will whisper, "See, this is just how life is for you." But healing begins when you answer, "No, that is how life was for who I used to be, and I am not that person anymore." This is the moment you stop defending your limitations and start defending your freedom. Detachment from the old identity means you no longer use your wounds as a compass. Instead of asking, "What will keep me from being hurt again?" you ask, "What will lead me toward the life I desire?" This shift changes everything because you stop moving away from pain and start moving toward possibility. The energy is different. One is about escape, the other about expansion, and you cannot expand if you are still chained to who you were when you were hurt. This detachment is not an act of coldness toward your past self. It is an act of compassion. You look at the version of you that endured the sleepless nights, that cried silently in rooms full of people, that endured what should never have been endured, and you say, "Thank you for keeping me alive. You did well, but I don't need you to run my life anymore." In that moment you take back the keys, and once you hold them, you begin to make choices not from the script of fear, but from the vision of faith. People around you may resist this change because they have only known the old you. They may try to pull you back into that familiar role, not out of malice, but because your growth challenges their comfort. This is where your choice becomes non-negotiable. You must be willing to disappoint the expectations of others in order to fulfill the promise to yourself. If someone can only love you as the version of you that does not choose yourself, then that is not love. It is attachment to their convenience. The new self will attract new relationships, new opportunities, new experiences that the old self could not have even perceived, because they were invisible from that level of consciousness. But this transition requires patience, because the world around you may take time to catch up to the reality you have chosen within. That is why detachment is not a one-time act, but a daily decision. Every morning you wake up and decide again, "I am not who I was. I am who I choose to be." And with each day you live from that choice, the old identity loses its grip, its voice grows fainter, and its shadow becomes harder to find. This is the true meaning of rebirth. It is not about changing your outer life first, but about dissolving the inner agreement that kept the old life alive. Some will say you have changed, and they will be right, but what they may not understand is that you have not become someone new, you have finally become yourself. The essence of you was always there, underneath the layers of fear and falsehood, waiting for the day you would stop carrying the weight of who you were told to be, and when you put it down, you feel lighter, freer, more yourself than you have ever been. The outer world will respond to this detachment in ways that feel miraculous, not because miracles suddenly appear, but because they were always there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the eyes of the real you to see them. This is why letting go of the old self is the most powerful act of healing you can do. You are not losing, you are reclaiming, you are not discarding, you are uncovering, you are not running away from the past, you are walking toward the future with the authority of someone who knows they are no longer bound. And the moment you choose that freedom, life begins to meet you at that level, unfolding with a richness and depth that the old self could never have imagined. Healing begins when you choose yourself the power of assumption in self-love. There is a law that governs every transformation, whether you are aware of it or not. You will always manifest the life that matches the assumptions you hold about yourself. These assumptions are not mere surface-level thoughts or fleeting affirmations. They are the deep, unwavering beliefs that live beneath your conscious mind and quietly shape every choice, reaction, and expectation you carry. You can say you love yourself 1,000 times a day, but if deep within you assume you are unworthy, unloved, or unimportant, life will reflect that inner assumption with precision. The outer world has no choice. It is a mirror, not a creator, and so the greatest act of self-love you can perform is to assume, without apology or negotiation, that you are already worthy, already chosen, already loved, already whole. This assumption does not require outer evidence to be valid. In fact, it must come before the evidence appears. The wounded self waits for proof before believing. The healed self understands that belief itself is the proof. To live from the power of assumption means you decide who you are within, and you persist in that decision until the outer must conform. It is not pretending, it is occupying the truth of your being before the world catches up. If you assume you are loved, you will walk into a room differently. Your posture will shift, your tone will soften, your presence will expand. People will feel it before they understand it, because you are radiating a state that demands a certain kind of response. If you assume you are valuable, you will no longer tolerate situations that diminish you, and without that tolerance, such situations will either transform or fall away. If you assume you are whole, you will stop trying to fill emptiness with people, possessions, or validation, and that inner wholeness will begin to attract experiences that match its completeness. The power of assumption in self-love is that it bypasses the endless waiting game. You are no longer waiting for the apology before you forgive yourself for staying too long. You are no longer waiting for the job offer before you see yourself as competent and capable. You are no longer waiting for the partner before you feel worthy of love. You step into the identity now because you understand that the outer is the echo and the inner is the voice. And when you change the voice, the echo cannot remain the same. This requires persistence because the old assumptions will try to pull you back. They will whisper that you are being unrealistic, that you are lying to yourself, that you are not there yet. But you must understand, you are not lying, you are declaring, you are not denying reality, you are creating it. The old assumptions may have been built by experiences that seemed undeniable at the time, but those experiences were only the harvest of earlier assumptions. You were never trapped by reality. You were trapped by what you assumed to be reality. Once you grasp this, you begin to live differently. You speak as though your healing has already happened. You move as though the answer has already arrived. You choose as though the future is already secured. And because life is compelled to match your dominant state, circumstances will begin to align with that inner certainty. People may look at you and wonder how you can be so at peace when nothing out there has changed yet, but you will know the secret. You are no longer measuring your worth or your wholeness by the shifting winds of the outer world. You have anchored it in the immovable ground of your own assumption. This is why self-love in its truest form is not just about doing nice things for yourself or speaking kindly to yourself. It is about establishing a new identity in which love for yourself is the unquestionable baseline. You no longer ask, "Am I lovable?" You assume, "I am love itself." You no longer wonder, "Will I ever be enough?" You assume, "I am more than enough." These are not delusions, they are decisions, and the longer you persist in them, the more the outer world will rearrange to accommodate them. When you begin this process, you may find resistance both within and without. The old self will resist because it knows its time is ending, and some people in your life may resist because your new assumption changes the way you engage with them. But this is the cost of elevation. What is not aligned with your new state cannot remain. It is not punishment, it is pruning. It is the removal of everything that would block the full bloom of your worth. The power of assumption in self-love is the recognition that the most important relationship you will ever have is with your own consciousness, because it is the source of every other relationship and experience in your life. When you choose yourself by assuming your own value, you give the outer world no choice but to see and treat you according to that value. You will find yourself naturally gravitating toward opportunities that match your worth, speaking words that affirm your identity, and attracting relationships that reflect your wholeness. And all of this happens without force or manipulation because you have changed the root. The outer is simply bearing the fruit. This is why healing begins the moment you decide to assume your own worth. It is not a process that needs years of proof. It is a state you can choose in an instant. Persist in until it is all you know. The world will try to convince you to be realistic, but reality itself is fluid, shaped moment by what you hold to be true. So be realistic about this. You are already everything you seek, and the moment you assume that as your truth, life will bend to reveal it. Healing begins when you choose yourself. Choosing yourself is choosing wholeness. To choose yourself is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of sacred restoration. It is the moment you stop seeing yourself as a fragmented collection of wounds, mistakes, and disappointments, and start recognizing that you have always been whole, even when you felt broken. The world often teaches you to measure your worth by what you give away, how much you sacrifice, how well you fit into the expectations of others. But choosing yourself means you no longer hand the pen of your story to anyone else. It means you refuse to live as a supporting character in a life that was meant for you to lead. Wholeness is not something you need to chase or earn. It is your natural state, obscured only by the beliefs and agreements you made when you thought you were less than enough. When you choose yourself, you are not creating wholeness. You are uncovering it. You are peeling back the layers of doubt, fear, and conditioning until you see the unshakable truth that you were never incomplete to begin with. This choice changes everything because the energy of wholeness is magnetic. When you stand in it, you stop chasing people, approval, or situations to complete you. You no longer make decisions from desperation or lack, because you understand that nothing and no one can add to or take away from the truth of who you are. The world mirrors this back to you with astonishing accuracy. Opportunities come not because you beg for them, but because your wholeness naturally attracts alignment. Relationships deepen not because you contort yourself to be chosen, but because you radiate a presence that is impossible to ignore. And here lies the quiet beauty. Wholeness changes the way you respond to life's challenges. In the old state, a rejection would shatter you, a setback would define you, and a loss would convince you that you were less. But in the state of wholeness, these moments may still bring pain, yet they do not change your foundation. You can feel the sting without letting it rewrite your identity. You can walk through the fire without questioning your worth. Choosing yourself means you finally prioritize the voice within over the noise around you. It means you say yes to your intuition even when others tell you to be realistic. It means you set boundaries not as walls to keep people out, but as gates to ensure that only what nourishes your wholeness can enter. And perhaps most importantly, it means you stop delaying your joy until conditions are perfect. You begin to live now as if you are already exactly where you are meant to be. Because in truth you are. Wholeness does not mean your life will be free of difficulty. It means difficulty will no longer fracture you. It means you can experience grief without becoming grief, feel anger without becoming consumed by it, and encounter uncertainty without losing your center. It is the deep knowing that no matter what changes, the core of you is unshaken. The moment you choose yourself in this way, the world begins to respond differently. People who once overlooked you now see you clearly, not because their eyes have changed, but because your light no longer dims itself to be palatable. Situations that once drained you no longer hold the same pull, because your energy is invested in what expands you rather than what empties you. This shift does not happen because you worked harder to be worthy. It happens because you stopped questioning whether you already were. Choosing yourself is the ultimate declaration of faith. Faith that your life has meaning, faith that your desires are valid, faith that you are not here to live small and unnoticed. It is aligning with the truth that the divine expresses itself through you, and to dim yourself is to deny that expression. When you live in wholeness, you no longer ask, "What if I'm not enough?" Instead, you ask, "What would I create if I knew I could not fail?" And you move in that direction without apology. This is where healing deepens, when you no longer see yourself as someone in need of fixing, but as someone who is simply remembering their true form. Wholeness calls you to stop settling for half-hearted connections, unfulfilling work, or lives that feel too small. It calls you to step into the spaces that challenge you to expand, to trust that the ground will appear beneath your feet as you walk. It invites you to live as if you are already whole because you are, and the outer world will eventually bend to reflect what you hold as true within. There will be moments when choosing yourself feels lonely, because not everyone will understand the boundaries you set or the paths you take. But solitude in wholeness is far more fulfilling than company in fragmentation. And as you remain committed to yourself, the right people and opportunities will meet you at the level of your wholeness, not your wounds. Choosing yourself is not a single decision. It is a daily devotion. Every day you affirm, "I am whole, I am worthy, I am enough." You act from that state, speak from that state, and expect life to respond to that state, and it will. Because wholeness is not something you need to fight for. It is something you need to remember. And once you remember, the rest of your life becomes an unfolding reflection of that truth. Healing begins when you choose yourself, living from the end of healing. Healing is not a distant destination you crawl toward through years of waiting, hoping, and wondering if you will ever get there. Healing begins the moment you stop defining yourself by the wound and start living though the restoration has already happened. To live from the end of healing is to anchor yourself in the reality that you are already whole, already free, already restored in the unseen, long before it takes shape in the visible world. This is not about pretending your pain never happened or denying the experiences that shaped you. It is about refusing to make them your identity any longer. When you live from the end, you stop telling the story of your life through the lens of what was broken and start telling it from the vision of what has been made new. Every thought, every choice, every word becomes an expression of the healed version of you, the one who has already overcome, already forgiven, already risen. You begin to carry yourself differently because you are no longer trying to get to healing. You are living in it now, and life, being the perfect mirror that it is, begins to reflect this new state back to you in ways that feel almost miraculous. The outer world is always catching up to the inner world. When you shift your inner state to match the reality you desire, You collapse the time between longing and fulfillment. Most people live in the energy of someday I'll feel better, someday I'll love myself, someday I'll be free from this weight. But someday is always tomorrow, and tomorrow never arrives unless you choose to live it today. Living from the end means you wake up each morning and act as if the prayer has already been answered. You speak as if the breakthrough has already happened. You walk into rooms as if you already belong there. This isn't delusion, it's alignment. You are aligning your present state with the frequency of your desired outcome, and by universal law the outer must conform. The old self will protest. Will remind you of past disappointments, point out the lack of visible evidence, and try to convince you that you are foolish for acting as if what you want is already yours. But the old self is built on memory, the healed self is built on vision. If you want the future to look different from the past, you cannot keep making decisions from the same state that created the past. Living from the end requires a stubborn, unwavering commitment to the truth you have claimed for yourself. It means that even on days when you feel the ache of old wounds, you do not give them the authority to define your steps. You acknowledge the feeling, but you act from the healed state. You may feel fear, but you choose courage. You may feel doubt, but you speak faith. You may feel the pull of the past, but you keep walking in the direction of your future. This is how new realities are born, not by waiting for feelings to change before you act, but by acting from the vision until the feelings catch up. When you live from the end of healing, you stop measuring your progress by how quickly the outer changes and start measuring it by how consistently you inhabit your chosen state. You no longer say, "I'll believe it when I see it." You say, "I'll see it because I believe it." And because belief is the seed from which all experience grows, your life begins to bear fruit that matches your inner certainty. This way of living also changes the way you interact with others. You stop needing them to validate your healing because you already know it is done. You stop explaining yourself to people who cannot yet see what you see, because you understand that their inability to perceive your new state has nothing to do with its reality. You become less reactive, less desperate, less impatient, because you know the outcome is inevitable. The healed version of you does not chase, cling, or beg. It moves with quiet confidence, knowing that what is meant for you is already on its way, and in truth already yours. Living from the end is also an act of gratitude. Gratitude is not just for what has been visibly received, it is for what you know is already unfolding. When you give thanks for your healing before it appears, you are affirming that it is already real in the unseen. That gratitude shifts your vibration, making you a match for the reality you've claimed. And as you maintain that state, the unseen becomes seen, the invisible becomes visible, and the intangible becomes your lived experience. This is why living from the end is so powerful, because it bypasses the need for proof and anchors you in the knowing that proof is simply the final echo of what you've already chosen within. There will be moments when the old story tries to reassert itself, when life tests your commitment to your new state. In those moments, your task is not to fight the old story, but to return to the end. Keep picturing the healed you. Keep feeling what it's like to live as them. Keep making decisions from their perspective. Eventually, the old story runs out of energy because you stop feeding it your attention, and when that happens, the new reality takes over completely. Living from the end of healing is not about waiting for life to choose you. It is about choosing yourself so completely that life has no choice but to reflect that choice. It is the final, unwavering declaration that you are not a work in progress, but a work completed in the mind of the divine, unfolding in perfect timing. And when you live from that truth, you are no longer chasing healing. You are living in it, and everything in your world begins to mirror it back.